In the midst of a crippling housing crisis,
I can tell you we need these houses like yesterday.
a showdown is brewing.
Well, of course, in any negotiation, we should be prepared to vote down a bill if the government refuses to move.
The government bringing its Housing Australia Future Fund bill back to Parliament. It's a $10 billion investment fund that aims to raise $500 million a year to build at least 30,000 affordable houses in the first 5 years. But last month, the Coalition and the Greens joined forces in the Senate to block the bill, frustrating those trying to get it over the line.
The homeless people that are sitting there on our streets every month that the Greens waste on this by not voting this through with Labor is another month that those people will be living in their tents for next year and the year after.
To secure their support, the Greens initially wanted an extra $5 billion for social and affordable housing, later dropping that to $2.5 billion. Today, reportedly another discount, the party willing to accept as little as $500 million extra per year. That figure later walked back. They also want more help for renters.
The bottom line is, at the very least, we need to make unlimited rent increases illegal. We've said we're willing to negotiate on the $2.5 billion, but it takes two to tango.
But the PM doesn't want to dance.
What they're asking for at the national level is for me to negotiate on behalf of 8 states and territories. And that's just, quite frankly, absurd.
If the Senate rejects the bill again, it could trigger a double dissolution election, which, unlike a normal election, means all the seats in the Senate are up for grabs.
The Prime Minister is threatening people with an early election, trying to distract from the fact that he has not addressed the rental crisis and the housing crisis.
Well, I'd rather not have it. I'd rather have this policy passed.
If the Prime Minister is looking at some political opportunity in some tricky, underhanded way to go to an early election so that he can try and belt the Greens around, well, I don't think the Australian public will reward that.
So with signs the Greens are willing to budge,
We don't expect to get everything.
will the government now budge too and get this deal over the line?
And the man who can make this happen, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, joins us. Prime Minister, if the Greens will accept an extra $500 million for social housing, why not just give it to them so we can get this done?
Well, we have, of course, got $1.6 billion for the extension of the Commonwealth State Housing Agreement this year. We put an additional $2 billion from the surplus to the states and territories in June. There's $2 billion of additional investment as well for community housing through the NIFIC, a body that provides funding for community housing. We're doing all of these measures are in place, and the Greens should vote for it, just like David Pocock and Jackie Lambie and other crossbenchers are voting for it. Indeed, the Coalition should as well. We all know that housing supply is the issue, so why wouldn't you support a policy that will increase that supply?
PM, the Greens always want more. They also want an increase, rent increases cap. They want a freeze on rent increases. What's your personal view on that? And I know it's a state issue, but have you lobbied the premiers on those two promises from the Greens?
Well, look, states and territories are taking their own response and are dealing with the issue. All the premiers and chief ministers are very conscious about these issues, but they know that the key is actually supply. They know that that's the thing that has really got to be addressed. But they know that they're doing that. The idea that they'll all do exactly the same thing, that the Greens essentially are trying to negotiate from the Commonwealth with every state and territory government. It's just setting itself up for political failure because it is just playing politics. I'm quite happy to take responsibility for things that are in the Commonwealth's domain. We've done that. We've provided an additional $2 billion of funding just in June. And of the 30,000 homes, 4,000 will be reserved for women and children escaping domestic violence. There'll be additional funding for veterans at risk of homelessness, as well as for the repair of Indigenous housing in remote communities. So this is a well thought out program. It is a good program and it should receive the support of the Senate.
So you do hold the biggest megaphone in the country though, and you do have the money to create incentives, which is what the Greens are actually asking for you to do. They're not asking for you to determine state policy, but rather to incentivise incentivise it. So before you get...
Well, they are actually.
Right, yeah, they want $1 billion. They want $1 billion on the table that you can then, the states can then use to incentivise it. But the question, I wouldn't mind getting an answer to Steve's question.
The problem with that, Waleed...
Yeah, go on.
The problem with that, Waleed, is that we put $2 billion on the table for states and territories in June.
No,
they must have missed
specifically
that.
on the question of rent caps.
Of that, that was an incentive.
This is to incentivise rent caps. So,
that was an incentive.
Sure, not for rent caps though. So I'm just interested in
that
the
was
question
an incentive for planning.
Yes,
that's planning. What we need to do.
Sorry, Prime Minister, I just want to get. I just want to get.
The key is fixing planning.
This is the point I'm interested in. Are you philosophically opposed to the rent caps and the idea of capping rent increases? Are you philosophically opposed to that and therefore won't use your megaphone for it?
What I want to do... Now, Waleed, that's not the question. The question here is states and territories will look at measures for renters and renters' rights. I want to see increased renters' rights, if that's what you're asking me. But there are 6 states and 2 territories, all whom have different systems in place. And the Greens are actually a part of the ACT government. They don't have, their so-called cap is for inflation plus 7%. So it's quite substantial as well. The question here, though, is how do we get states and territories to have better planning so we get increased supply of housing? Okay. That's the key thing that we put the $2 billion on the table for, and that is what we'll continue to discuss with states and territories. And you've seen New South Wales and Victoria make statements about that because that's what we need to address.
All right, can I come to the Taipan chopper tragedy? We learned today that these choppers have been plagued with issues we've known about for years. We spoke to Glenn Kolomitz earlier in the show. He's a former Labor Defence Policy Advisor, actually, and he says that Australia just has a habit of paying top dollar for rubbish equipment. Do you agree with that assessment?
Look, today's the day, Waleed, with respect, where we're dealing with 4 families who've lost loved ones. Today's a day to think of those families. That's my focus today. There will be an appropriate investigation and that needs to run its course. We'll take any recommendations from that, obviously, seriously. But today is a day where my focus as Prime Minister is on not just the directly grieving families, but the Defence Force family as well.
Sure, and we all feel for them, but do you not think those families, and indeed anyone who might become a family of a Defence Force soldier in the future, would want to know whether or not we keep buying rubbish equipment?
Yes, Waleed, and there'll be an appropriate investigation on that and appropriate responses. Today's not the day for me to speculate about what has occurred. It's important to not add to the difficult day that people are going through. So I'm not saying that these things should not be looked at. Of course they should be. We had a Defence Strategic Review that actually found a range of issues in terms of equipment and made recommendations to the government. And indeed, the government is responding to that appropriately.
Albo, before we let you go, now the Matildas play later tonight. It's a do-or-die game. Now, you promised the nation a public holiday if they won the World Cup. As soon as you did that, they lost. Did you put the mocker on them? What have you done here? And if they do continue to lose, do we get a day of mourning, maybe?
Excellent.
Well, I'm very confident that they'll have a win tonight. I'll certainly be watching from Canberra, and I think the whole of Australia will be behind them. And I'm sure that Sam Kerr being on the pitch will make a big difference. I thought they played exceptionally well against Nigeria.
But you're not answering the question, Prime Minister.
If you're that confident, are you willing to bet a day of mourning on it?
A day of mourning.
But look what he's done. He's just taken over coaching the Matildas.
That's not a sign of confidence. That's a sign of concession. I'm talking Australia up, talking the Matildas up. I'm very confident that they'll win and that they'll go through to the round of 16 and that they'll keep winning.
Holiday's still alive, Sammy. The holiday's still alive.
I just want a day off, Albo. Just give us a day off. That's all I want.
The dream.
Yeah.
Prime Minister, thank you so much for your time tonight. Really appreciate you joining us.
Fantastic. Thanks.